listening to the Subrogation Support Network, a podcast from Matthiessen, Wickert & Layer, America's subrogation law firm, with dissemination of new developments and changes in subrogation law, as well as emerging trends and best practices. Here's your host, Ashton Kirsch.
Hello, everybody in the audience. This is Ashton Kirsch, your host with the Subrogation Support Network podcast, brought to you by Matthiessen, Wickert & Layer, attorneys at law. Today, we're going to talk about a great topic, construction defect claims, fire claims, and guidance that we can give you on retaining experts, what to look for, and the nuances of construction defect and other defect claims in general. It's my honor and my privilege to have Pete Fowler join me today. Pete, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Ashton.
Excellent. Well, Pete, tell me a bit about yourself personally. Well, first introduce your company, and then let's talk about you. Then we can talk more about what services you provide.
Company is just, the name harkens from my gross lack of creativity and indiscretion of youth. It's called Pete Fowler Construction Consultants. And we're a national firm with offices from Southern California to Florida. And I think we have people in 16 states, and we're expert consultants. So, expert witness consultants with expertise in virtually all aspects of the building life cycle. So anything from designers like architects and engineers, developers, contractors, building inspectors, construction managers, testing, inspection and testing expertise, building maintenance and operation. We deal with that a lot in our slip, trip, and fall claims. And so most of the work we do is in litigation, or it's an expensive insurance claim. We do a decent amount of desktop review just when adjusters have situations where either they think the number they're being proposed to resolve the claim is a little outrageous, and they just need somebody to look at it for somewhere between an hour and 8 hours to tell them whether or not it's the right number, or whether or not they think their client is responsible. So, and whether they should be subrogating, or when they get a subrogation claim against them, they're like, hey, is this legitimate? Did my client cause this problem? And lots of times the answer, well, it's probably half and half. Oh yeah, yours is the guy. But oftentimes it's absolutely no. And they just say no, thank you. And it goes away.
Very nice. And so it sounds like you guys do quite a bit, right? A lot of construction defect. Would that be your primary practice?
So it's technically the biggest practice. It used to be, when I started the business in the year 2000, it was about 90% of the work. And over time, it got to be, it's down to probably 30 or 35% of the work now. And so the next biggest is probably property claims, then injury claims, both slip, trip, and fall claims, and construction project site accidents. We do a lot of those, unfortunately. We bought a fire investigation company, so we do hundreds of transactional fire origin and cause investigations every year. And then anything you can think of that would make someone mad or sad about a building project, either a building project, building the verb, or a building, the noun, right? When somebody falls down the stairs of a historic building, which we've had, many, many of those. I had somebody fall through the skylight of a historic building. Is terrible. But just anything you can think of. Traditional construction contract claims where there's just it took too long, or it cost too much, or people started arguing during the project. So
you have engineers, you have architects. It sounds like desk estimators or reviewers. You have people that can really handle anything when it comes to a forensic end, both on the subrogation side, if somebody needs an expert engineer to testify as to, of course, a construction defect claim, but also a fire loss, so water loss, and everything in between. Is that about right?
That's exactly right. So from a construction, design or construction perspective, for most of our claims, the question is, was the property designed correctly? Was it built correctly? Was it operated within the standard of care, and was it maintained within the standard of care? So we're standard of care experts in many aspects of buildings.
And you're on the conference circuit with me, so we see each other around all the time. Now, for those in the audience who can't see you and they're listening on, be it Audible, Spotify, wherever, Apple Podcast, They're not seeing the guitars in the background. So I feel like we need to have a bit of more background on Pete Fowler person. Tell me about your life in the rock band.
Sorry. My mother forced me to go to college when I was 21, when I was having way too good a time playing in a rock and roll band. I was broke, but I was happy as a clam. So I had a gig this weekend. I now play with the same guy that I had long hair in the 80s, and we wore leopard skin spandex, and it was a crazy, funny, silly show. And the same best buddy I had then that I played with, we now fast forward. We didn't play in a band together for 35 years. We're back in a band, and now we wear skin tight imitation red leather pants, and we're in a band called the Brogos. It's an all-male tribute to the 80s ladies. So we play the Go-Go's, and we play Pat Benatar, and we play, so all those great 80s ladies songs. We played it. We're in a tribute band to those folks.
So I feel like the title of this podcast should be Long Hair and Leopard Skin Spandex. I think that's good. So what caused you? All right. So then what caused you? You're out there rocking, you're still doing it, to get into this trade, right? The engineer.
Defect. I literally was digging ditches to pay for my rock and roll career in construction. You're either in construction or food service if you're trying to make it in rock and roll. My buddy was in food service, so we got free pizza from him. I wasn't very helpful because I was digging ditches early in the morning. And when I got to college, I didn't even know they gave degrees in construction management, but eventually I figured that out. First, I was a journalism major because I'm a decent writer. And I'm not a great writer compared to great writers, but compared to construction guys, I'm a great writer. So journalism major, construction management degree. I also ended up with a minor in computer information systems. So it was like, poof, you're a consultant, right? I have low performance anxiety. I'm a decent writer. So I just ended up a consultant. I can write a 300-page report that people can understand and make sense of. And I can testify, essentially, right? I get verbally punched in the face for a living by smart people. So I can keep my composure when someone's smart who has every interest in making me look like a buffoon. I can hold my own in that setting. So
you can't train that. That's a skill set. That's a skill set in and of itself. That's fantastic.
Well, I descend from a long line of drunken bar fighting Irishmen. All right. Which I gave up the bar fighting, but they had this attitude like, hey, is this a private fight or can anybody join?
Well, that reminds me. So for a few podcasts a while ago, I was really big into talking AI, and I was doing AI and just like all the crazy technologies. Now, one of them is the Suno music app. Have you heard about that before I played around with it?
Did you say Sonos?
Suno, S-U-N-O.
No, I have not.
Okay, so man, I do songs. Like I just did during the podcast, I put a prompt in, and it would just make a song on everything. And I haven't done it for so long, but I feel like this is perfect. So while we are talking, I will make a song as our exit song for when everyone leaves. They can leave the song, and I guarantee there's going to be something about long hair and Spanish and drunken Irishmen.
Yes,
mixed in there. So all right, so toss it. So
I love this.
That's the fun stuff. All right, so now on to the meat of it. Now, so when it comes to experts, when it comes to working with adjusters and attorneys, obviously one of the most significant things you can do is work on making sure all evidence is preserved, making sure that the clients get you the cases early enough. What advice do you have for the adjusters out there and those who are retaining you early on, maybe attorneys, on what they can do to make your life easier as a consultant, as an engineer, as an expert?
So our best clients call us all the time. And they'll say things like, I don't think I'm going to hire you on this, but can I tell you this story for 5 minutes? And we've always got 5 minutes for our good clients. So they call us and we talk them through it. And sometimes we can help and they're surprised. But usually we just help them by helping them to make smarter and smarter decisions over time, right? And so I recommend have some vendors that you know and like and think are smart. And, for us, we have a larger firm now. So whoever answers the phone can say, well, on vacation this week, but, Bob is available. You want to talk to him? Right. So people, they don't even know, they know we're clients, so we're driving in the car, we're talking to people. I think that's the lost art of picking up the phone. Right. I heard a guy give a talk and he said, when you ask a millennial, did they call somebody and they tell you yes, what they meant is they sent them an email.
That's the truth. So not to steal your thunder, but my daughter, I do training on negotiations and do it 20 times, probably 30 times a year. And one of the biggest things I talk about is pick up the damn phone, have a virtual meeting, because my daughter taking her birthday party. I've told the story on the podcast and the audience is getting sick of it. And I'm like, hey, what's the address? It's 20 minutes away. And she's like, oh, let me text and find out. I'm like, no. Call the friend. And she's like, Dad, people don't call each other anymore. And I'm like, what the heck?
It's aggressive.
We see that with a lot of people in this generation, the upcoming generation, is they've become less efficient, less effective because they won't pick up the phone. They need to just send a message, which takes twice as long sometimes. So, all right, sorry. Go ahead.
I agree with this 100%. Human-to-human contact, we see it in our office. We see it. So, we literally, it's something I have to talk about constantly. So picking up the phone and calling somebody and talking to them about it, it's so much more effective, right? So, but other than that, you need to work with a firm who is, and by the way, much of what I will say is in a couple of articles on my website. So just go to petefowler.com, learn articles. So expert consultants, right? If somebody's got a head full of construction knowledge or knowledge about buildings in some way, they spend a lifetime filling it up. You don't want to ask them things about insurance coverage or about the process, the legal process. But those people need to be both insurance coverage aware, subrogation aware, and litigation aware, right? So you could be the smartest engineer in the world, but if you don't understand the comings and goings of insurance coverage, of subrogation, and of the process of litigation, it can be dangerous, right? You can write dumb things. So for us, I can't make a construction or a building expert, but I can find great building experts and teach them to be litigation aware, subrogation aware, and coverage aware. So finding people who you can rely on to not screw things up because they have enough awareness along with their expertise.
And that's one thing where I have a friend of mine who owns an architectural firm and they have building consultants, all the above. But I've asked him to kind of like, hey, why don't you do forensics work? And his answer is, it's just totally different. It takes a different mindset. How do you train? That's I've never even thought of that before, but how do you train somebody who is, just like lawyers, we love to read books. We can be quite nerdy. Engineers have the same background. How do you train that person to be able to communicate in the correct way, to be on the witness stand, to, write a persuasive report? Because I feel like that's both innate and it's also learned. But, what do you do when you're looking for those people?
So let me say this. I was saying on and on 2-3 years ago, I'm like, I want to be known as the best report writing company in the country, as far as in the world of construction. And one of the young guys, he said, I think we already are. All right. So that is, and that just comes from we're very process oriented. And my having written the first magazine article about construction defects back in the 1990s, that is step one for us. We write down what we think. We're 1.5 books into our book series. This is Pete Fowler over there.
Oh, interesting. Right? That'll be on my list of questions in a few minutes. Yeah. Tell me about your book, but go ahead.
So the first draft of Drama-Free Expert Witness will be out, and it'll probably be 6 months before there's printed copies around. It's 3/4 written. So we write a lot, and then we do what Amazon does, and we have a silent start. So we'll have a meeting, and we don't ask them to do their homework because we know a bunch of people won't do their homework because they're busy. So we all read a chapter together, and then we talk about it. And then we have a super peer review culture. We'd rather have an uncomfortable conversation internally than get a ass kicking externally.
Yep.
So we review each other's work. And sometimes sometimes that's a rough and tumble game with a bunch of experts, if you call a guy an expert for long enough, they start thinking it's true, so they start messing with each other, but it's good, right? I mean, rough conversations, steel sharpens steel, so to speak. So we have those internal conversations about the work. And plus we have a balance of really smart professional project managers, like certified PMP folks that work alongside and in partnership with our subject matter experts. And lots of those people are great writers. And we literally put pictures of my mom into files and say, explain this to Pete's mom. She's a very smart person. She literally paid for him to go to engineering school. She's a barber. She quit high school when she was 16 to marry Pete's dad. It didn't last very long, but she's at least as smart as the average juror. So explain it to her. She didn't go to engineering school. Explain it. And so we have to use small words and short sentences. And if anybody in our office doesn't understand what a technical expert is trying to communicate, that's the technical expert's fault.
That's huge. And that's important. And that probably comes into when you write your reports. Well, first off, I'm going to note for my audience, I always advise my clients, do not, if you can avoid it, get a written report until a counsel's involved, because we're going to want to work with the team putting that together. But then again, the way that report is written is hugely important. It needs to be persuasive. It needs to be able to be used appropriately, especially if it's going to be used to resolve a case through negotiations. And that sounds like something that you train your team on. Now, tell me about your book a little bit. What is the book?
So that book, I got my arm twisted into co-writing, to co-writing a management book. So it's drama-free management. And so my mentor, Marla Knoll, she's like, I really like your writing. It's like, yeah, and I needed to write how we had gone from small to larger for our team so that we learned from what we had done, and we can, the power of the word is undeniable, right? It really, I publish a lot of stuff just to make sure that all the other experts in the office feel compelled to read it, because we know that the opposing counsel are going to read it and try and use it against us. So that's part of it, just to get us all on the same page on what we do and how we do it. How do we think about managing this business? And then the drama-free expert stuff, which is really an accumulation of a bunch of articles we published in other magazines, other publications that are on our website. And the whole idea, what are we doing here philosophically? What are we doing here process-wise, right? Like, so I have an article that we wrote called The Zero Waste Subrogation Expert. And so how do we, because I'm sure everybody in the world of subrogation who's hired an expert has had the experience of giving an expert a pile of documents, and then they get a giant bill, and maybe they get a giant awesome report, or maybe they get something completely off base. But there's a way to manage that to at least keep the loss to a minimum, right? We start with a minimum viable product. You give us stuff, you give us somewhere between 4 and 16 hours of time to work. There's the budget. Don't go past that. And if you call me and you don't have anything smart to say after 4 to 16 hours, then you're already fired. Right? So, and anybody, we've hired people, and I deal with them sometimes on the other side, where they say, I need all of the information, 100%. It's like, okay, well, then you're fired. Right. Because on 99% of our work, we have to hypothesize with less than 100% of the information. And when we do that, even when we do it in 4 or 8 or 12 hours, we're right about 90% of the time. Now, is there a chance if you spend 12 hours and you hypothesize, you say, I think this is this is the problem and it's worth this much, we estimate, right? So that's helpful. Is there a chance that new information will come in after the fact that will change our opinion? Absolutely. And we have to be open to that as folks who are doing work that is forensic, right? But forensic means it has to be scientific. It has to be repeatable. It has to conform with something like the federal rules of evidence. So do we have to be open to changing our opinion when new information comes in? Absolutely. But we're right more than 90% of the time, right out of the chute.
Right.
So our minimum viable product is we get on you give us some stuff and we call you and we say, here's the big picture of the project and what we perceive as our role in the big picture. That's number one. Number two is here's what we have to work with and here's what might be missing. That's number two. Number three is what we've done to analyze it. If we've spent 4 hours or 40 or 400, you should know that from this conversation, right? So that's number three, what we've done. And then number four is what we think. And number five is what we recommend you either do next. Sometimes it's like, you better settle this claim because your client is guilty. We don't work for only innocent people. And sometimes it's like, yeah, this claim is ridiculous and you should tell them to pound sand.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's something that's really important. And it's an art. And that is being able to really look at a case. And you need to understand subrogation to truly advise on the extent of effort that can go into a claim. Because I'll be honest with you, I've had engineers, very experienced, amazing, brightest people. And guess what? You get them a case. And if you don't tell them what the case is worth, like we'll litigate, I mean, at times, $40,000, $50,000 products cases, right? Yeah. Good cases. But if I have my engineer treat that case like a multi-million-dollar exposure, and you've seen that before, where it's like, oh no, to get to this, we're going to have to spend another 40 hours. It's like, listen, that's not really where we're at. So understanding subrogation, understanding the efficiencies, effectiveness, and how claims work is hugely important for engineers. And where the audience out there can kind of learn on that is you need to talk to your experts. You need to trust them, one. You need to trust their ability to communicate. You need to be able to know that you can talk to them about the facts of the case, and also not just the facts, but also the economic viability of the case to make sure the right testing is done. You know, you don't always, you make a good point. It's kind of like, I'd be interested in having a presentation or something that like it's the parental principle, it's the 80-20 rule, and engineering. Obviously, you need to be able to get to the right scientific place, but scientific place doesn't require absolute unquestioned certainty after review of every single thing that could have been reviewed. It's a requisite level of expertise and engineering certainty that's needed.
That's right. And getting to the level of certainty, we call it, so we break our engagements into multiple levels. Usually there's 5 levels, and level 1 is an order of magnitude or a go, no-go decision, or just a basic analysis, whatever you call it. And level 5 is we just presented to the jury, right? So that's in everything in between, right? So to go to mediation, you probably want to go past level 1 of a go, no-go. But, are we doing a go, no-go thing here? Yeah, it seems like a good case. Seems like you could get 50 grand back, and I've already spent $2,500, so I know I can't spend much more money. You want me to write you a report that says it's this? Yes or no? But if it's a $5 million claim, let's work this thing up and make sure you're ready to get maximum value out of it.
Yeah, and every case is going to be so different. Like I said, our firm does have a dollar threshold, but we don't do any insured work. But most of my work is I do a lot of market share losses, cases, 10 million, 20 million, $30 million, big commercial properties. Yeah. But my firm handles, like I said, the $50,000 case, but we need to make sure that they're going to be handled. I have 7 engineers on one large construction defect case for every different area, every different scenario. But that's not the case in other circumstances. So you need an engineer, an expert firm you can trust. Call someone up on the phone. That's hugely important from our end. I train my clients and I did a NASP last year and being an expert and selecting experts. And one of my main points I gave was, if there is an asteroid coming towards Earth, it's about to impact, the president of the United States calls all engineers to the White House to fight in the new MMA arena. No, to the White House, let's say, to talk to them about getting their expertise. And they call the best construction defect engineer. Well, guess what? That person is probably not going to be the same engineer that we're going to want to hire to do the forensic work and testify on the stand and be able to support themselves in litigation. Now, on your end, what training do you give, or how do you kind of make sure your team, and how should other vendors and engineering firms make sure their team get the requisite litigation experience or can be that person?
So I mentioned earlier that I got a minor in computer information systems. So I'm kind of a crazy person I've had the same genius IT guy on staff for over 20 years now, 22 years. And we've built this amazing information system. And each person that gets hired in my firm gets their own customized training program. We went to go buy a learning management program. We were going to spend, oh my goodness, it was an ungodly sum, and realized we already have a learning management program. So all of our stuff, we have videos, we have, of course, the articles. They got to read the externally published articles, and we have internal. Some people call them standard operating procedures. The Toyota production system, they call them standard work. So whatever you call them, we call them training pages. So we have training pages, and we assign them, and they go through them. They do exercises, but the most important training that we do is just we lead the business, we manage the business, and we train our people by doing great work. We have a very clear definition of what awesome work looks like to us. And, by having interviewed our clients for now over 25 years, and they have told us what awesome work looks like from their perspective, we teach it to our people, and we have checklists and training about how to make sure that defective work never gets downstream to the client.
So let's flip the script a little bit. A lot of times I'm talking about what adjusters can do better, what engineers can do better. We talked a lot about that, how to be a great engineer, how to be a great expert. Now, what can lawyers do better on your end? You're seeing it from a different perspective, and you're seeing the lawyers working with you. Any advice to the lawyers in the audience and what we can do to make your lives easier as the experts we retain to pursue cases?
If I can get my company, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times larger, which is not we're twice the size we were 3 years ago. So if I can get on that trajectory, I'm going into the business of law, because the way my business runs is very similar to the way a law firm should run. And so the real fundamentals, what I see it all the time. People send me giant files, thousands of pages, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pages regularly, right? I mean, these are big files, and they're a mess. It's not a project file, it's a project pile.
I like that.
And I know,
copyright.
And I know for a fact they send that same pile to other consultants like me here. You have that case with the 7 engineers on, right? So we're sometimes, because I'm a general contracting expert, we're sometimes the lead expert. So they'll send it to us. We will organize it into a very sensible file, and then we will send it to the other consultants. So that's one thing you can do, by the way. But if you guys want to get the billing, figuring out how to make a sensible file, summarize it. You don't analyze it, right? Because you don't want the other side asking your building consultant, oh, so Ashton summarized this document for you, didn't he? And he told you what to say, didn't he? So not that, but just the fact of organizing something sensibly. Oftentimes the answer is just flow,
right?
Just from the organization. So there's an academic principle that it goes from data, and you take a bunch of data, if you structure it properly, it becomes information. If you then analyze it properly, it becomes knowledge. And if you analyze that properly, it becomes wisdom. So data, information, knowledge, wisdom. So that transition, we call that transition pile, file, knowledge, solution. We're in the solution making business. So lots of the work we do is literally taking a pile of data and transforming it into information, which then we apply subject matter expertise so it becomes knowledge, and we can talk about it with our clients, both the insurance people, the attorneys, and then we can create the most sensible solution from that based on all of the foregoing.
That makes sense. So, I mean, kind of in a nutshell and kind of synopsized, when it comes to these lawyers, we should be more strategic in how we present everything to you. And obviously you're going to review everything, but you're right. I mean, you see this all the time where you're hiring your engineer. It's like, whatever, here you go, get on the case, deal with it. Right. And then a lot of times we do a good job with it, I think, here, but I've seen plenty of other scenarios where we're pursuing a subrogation case, say construction defect. We then find out that the engineer who wrote the report for the defendant didn't get this really important record that the insurance carrier had. So we have it. We produced it in discovery even. And they're like, oh my God, our entire basis for our defense is faulty because we, the lawyers, didn't make sure, or the insurance company, whomever, didn't make sure that the experts had everything. So more organization on the lawyer end. That sounds like that's the advice.
Yeah, it's more organization by somebody, right? It's and oftentimes, so lawyers are not, we have whatever we do 1,000 projects a year now. We've done more than 10,000 over time. So many lawyers are not very good at math, and not very good at organization, and not very good at business management. So geniuses as far as, the law and argumentation and all that stuff. Nobody's everything, right? Nobody is a genius at everything. So deciding who on the team is going to do what is the highest form of wisdom, I think, right?
Absolutely. Listen, we all know 1 + 1 = 3, right?
Exactly.
Lawyer math for you.
Just so you know, being an estimator, it's my favorite thing when I'm only the estimator, because most lawyers look at my estimate like,
please interpret this to me.
Thanks.
That's where the communication skills come into play, right? You need to be able to explain it to us, even assuming that the lawyers know what we're talking. We know what we're talking about, but obviously we're hiring engineers for a purpose, right? All right. So one thing I do want to make sure that we touch on for the audience is that we've had a lot of good takeaways, but kind of into like the nuts and bolts of, subrogation claims. I'd love to know more about your thoughts on identification is the biggest thing, right? Most money, $15 billion. I've seen some studies say 25 billion of subrogation dollars, of recoveries are just not identified every year. The claims aren't pursued. So that's one of the biggest things. And in the construction arena, that's where we see massive losses. And we see subrogation not being pursued for a number of reasons. One, it's really complex. Two, a lot of times there's waivers of subrogation, which I'll be honest with you, we often can get around. Not always, but we can. Two, so a lot of times you'll have adjusters who have a massive loss, waiver of subro. They'll just think, the OSIP policy, there's something in there that keeps the claim from being pursued, and they don't identify until later. My firm, some other firm sees on a secondary review, we realize, now the scene's gone. We can't pursue it. So I want to just quickly get into this. What are some of the most common types of defect claims you're seeing that the audience should think about? My number one recently has been, I did a presentation on the post-COVID construction system, how we had the interest in building all these houses, tract homes, houses on a massive scale, and we have all these common defects, construction issues. Just like when it comes to manufacturing of products, we have a ton of products that are starting fires now. A ton of electrical work that's starting fires because people moved too quickly. They had shoddy products. They had poor workmanship. They had to hire Joey down the street, who is a high school kid who had never done work before, and now he's your new electrical assistant. We're seeing a ton of that. What are your thoughts, and what other type of claims do you think the audience should be thinking about when it comes to subrogation?
So for us, I'm hyper vigilant about fire claims because we do fire investigations, right? So lots of those claims are ripe for subrogation. So I'll leave it at that because I think people generally know that, but I know I like I said, I did a presentation the week before last with a subrogation lawyer who he wants to pull his hair out at the cases that people don't send him, right? And at least half of these are fire claims where they absolutely can be pursued and should be pursued. So those are absolutely, like every fire claim should be looked at. Regarding the quality of the construction since COVID, we had a perfect storm of there is no one to do the construction, right? There's the greatest lack of labor in construction in my career, for sure. Construction cost estimating was boring for 25 years. Costs barely ticked up for 25 years. And then they exploded during COVID. So we have another program and an article that's 2/3 written called Estimating in a Turbulent World. And we thought that the turbulent world of COVID would calm down, and it has not calmed down. It is as turbulent as ever right now. So just the cost estimating, it's gone crazy. So if something seems crazy to you and you send it to me, I might tell you it's okay. Don't but usually not. Usually when people send me something and they say, I think this is crazy there, right? It's, so we can help with that. But the construction, it was literally on the cover of the Wall Street Journal last week. The number of construction defect claims right now is as high as ever. And the defective work is crazy. It's like, whoa. When I started in this business in the 1990s, I was looking at 80s, late 80s, early 90s construction, and it was very bad. And it's back to that level of bad. Construction defect litigation smacked most big builders into doing better work. And they've given up the idea of managing quality. So it's a fascinating time in the world of building. So many of it, like if you have a roof leak in a relatively new home, certainly that's a claim that should be made to the builders, right? If you have a statute of repose of 10 years and you got a 5-year-old home with a massive water intrusion, you've got a good opportunity for a claim. If you've got a skyscraper and you have a massive water intrusion event, you highly likely have a massive claim. We're doing work in, I have an office in Florida, and boy, some of the work is fantastic. And a lot of it is like, whoa, this is very bad. So.
Yeah, well, these developers, a lot of times, you see, I'm in litigation against a lot of different major developers around the country for defect claims involving, oftentimes it's not even the most significant individualized loss, right? We're talking about, I have a number of this whole community where the code says that the beams have to be this far apart, but they're actually this far apart, or whatever it could be, everything's not braced appropriately. And, this is an occurrence that you look into and you're realizing, no, they just thought they'd never be caught. They can save this much in product by cutting this corner and then save this much in time. So they just did it, right? And it's not always, that's a big miss is, that there's just a lot of these massive projects and they're hoping they don't get caught. Hoping they realize it after the statute of repose or wherever it could be. But then you also see situations where you just don't have the same craftsmanship, right? You don't have the same trades right now, which despite all of the amazing technical colleges that are giving great opportunities for our youth, a lot of the people really aren't going into those trades, and those that are doing it because they can't find anything else. And the good ones have to bring in workers who then, they try to train, but they can't. And especially that was a big problem during COVID when, frankly, people were weren't necessarily working as much. And you're seeing the consequences today. And that is going to keep going on for a long time.
Yeah, I hope that tide is turning, but there's still, I have a case right now where the homeowner, he's just putting dishes away, taking out a dishwasher, and the whole cabinet fell down, hit him, broke his foot, came apart all in the kitchen. It was the worst manufactured cabinet I've ever seen. Absurd, like defective design of the cabinet, worst cabinet construction I've ever seen. And the worst installation, they overdrove the fasteners through all the way through the material. Everything you could do wrong was wrong. And their representative came out after I explained all these problems to him. They're like, no, that's fine. That's exactly how it should have been done. It's fine. Okay. All right. Well, we'll just tell that story to the jury if you think if that's what your preference is. So it's an interesting time with builders and their willingness to just say no.
Yeah, and we're seeing it across, stucco claims. We have a ton of those. EIFS siding. EIFS is an awful product unless done totally right. A lot of those cases. Yeah. Other cases we're seeing are just everything from, a lot of electrical fires, right? A lot of outlets that weren't properly grounded. We had a whole community where they didn't ground any of the electrical outlets.
Wow.
Fantastic. And nobody knows until the house is tested upon sale eventually later, or unless there's a catastrophic circumstance. Right. We have scenarios right now where a lot of them, they didn't use, despite code requires water lines installed this close to, to the wood, right? It needs to have a nail guard or some sort of metal plating. And all these properties, they just, we save the money on the metal plating. Nobody's going to realize until somebody's putting a TV up and, the bolt goes right through the the water line, floods the house. There's so many of these things going on today, and that's not going to change. The construction industry, I'll be honest with you, maybe in the 80s, 90s when this happened, you saw the litigation, but they're making so much money on these houses. And you have way more. I mean, I think back from what I understand, there were a lot of, my grandfather was a builder. He built 5 houses a year. Now these construction companies are building 500 houses a year. And there's a lot of more room for cutting those corners to make a little more profit that over time equals a lot. I mean, it's a wild place. It's beautiful. Anything else when it comes to types of claims that you want to touch on that you think would be relevant to mention?
What else? Well, I mean, sometimes, often, many of the cases that we work on, both on the injury claims, right? So we work on slip, trip, and fall claims. And people will sometimes ask me, so are you a safety engineer? Like, no, we are architects and engineers and building maintenance and operation professionals, construction maintenance and operation professionals. So we can tell you whether or not we think that the construction or the maintenance or the operation caused or contributed to the incident, right? Because sometimes people fall down on a stairway and the stairway is perfectly fine. It's not the building owner's fault if somebody falls down on a perfectly fine stairway. And in fact, sometimes it's not the building owner's fault, even if the stairway is not exactly perfect. I've been to trial on an imperfect stairway where my client, I just said, it wasn't imperfect enough to cause this incident. It didn't cause this incident, I don't think. I've done 1,000 of these. When it's a real problem, I say it's a problem. This wasn't the problem. It didn't cause or contribute to this incident. That imperfection is different than the cause or contribution of this incident. So those are, is the building at fault? And we are much more qualified than a traditional safety expert that doesn't know about design, construction, operation, and maintenance. And of course, the construction project site accidents. If somebody just trips and falls because of their own employer, they can't sue their own employer. So they go looking to sue other folks. So it's a subrogation-like situation where the injured party is trying to blame somebody else in a multi-employer work site situation, which construction almost always is. So in those circumstances, we have to use the applicable OSHA standards, and we have to look to the contracts. You don't always want a safety engineer. Sometimes you want a contracting expert who knows what the contractors should have done. What was their standard of care for keeping their employees safe and for not injuring the employees of other employers?
Absolutely. So, it seems like a great place there where obviously I tell all my clients, if somebody slips and falls, there's subrogation potential. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a viable case, but it means it should be looked into. And a lot of times there are firms, safety experts, other consulting firms. And that's one issue we have that's endemic in the industry is engineers and experts pretending like they're jacks of all trades, right? It sounds like you have different people who do different things. Fantastic. But the same person who does your complex fire laws maybe isn't the same person who's going to have the expertise on the slip and fall and construction defect. So that's important. It's remembering to get somebody out there. Take a look at the photographs because a lot of times there can be viability, right? It could be as simple as I had a case that I recovered $500,000 on last year. It was a doorstop. And the doorstop was legitimately placed right to the center of the door in the middle of everything. So if somebody's walking by the door and they just trip on the doorstop, no identification for subrogation potential. But I was able to bring in a firm like you, and you guys be able to look at it and say, yeah, that is absolutely not per building standards and code, which a safety expert maybe would get to. But a lot of that more design stuff, code stuff, is much more in the wheelhouse of the construction folks. And that sounds like a great use factor for a company like yours.
And people will email us stuff like that all the time. Is this okay? And sometimes we're like, looks pretty normal. But sometimes like, whoa, no, that's not okay.
Well, hey, listen, it was a pleasure. The audience got some great information from you. I'd ask Pete, stay in touch. Thank you so much today.
Ashton, nice to talk to you. Thank you for having me.
And as we close out, as we haven't done for probably a year now, we are going to play the Suno-inspired, from the app, I need to say that, song that was created by AI with a couple prompts from our conversation today. I'm assuming it's going to be PG, but we did include some stuff about an Irish drunk punching person and some other stuff. So we'll see what happens as we close it out. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good one. Again, Ashton Kirsch, Pete Fowler with the Subrogation Support Network podcast. Until next time.
Pete Fowler on the line. Pete Fowler Construction Services on Ashton Kirsch's podcast. Subrogation Support Network. Claims in the deep end. Defects in the fire. Product losses, busted walls. He keeps the truth alive. Pick up the phone, say what you know. Keep it clean, let the record grow. Preserve that proof, lock it in place. Support the carrier face to face. Pete Fowler, best report in the world. Pete Fowler, make the whole case work. Pick up the phone, keep the line hot. Pete Fowler, give the clients what he's got. Drunken Irishman grin and he takes a few hits. Good at getting punched, still he never quits. Walks through the smoke with a notebook and a plan. Turns a broken side